So I was asked to do this presentation, and am I ever glad I see the fire department in the back, because I can certainly tap into them. But the topics we want to talk about today is working at heights / confined space, also machine safety, talking about augers in particular, and lockout tagout. Again, I'll try to blend them together as much as possible. Working at heights, confined space, how many people here have fall arrests and all that type of equipment that they deal with when they're working? 1, 2, 3, 4, any more? It is a challenge, there's no two ways about it. I mean, I can stand here and I can tell you that if you are under the federal legislation of the Canada Labor Code, if you work at 7 feet or higher, with a potential of falling, you must have fall arrest. And if you're under Occupational Health and Safety Act of Ontario, if you work at 10 feet or higher with a potential of falling, you must have fall arrest to protect you. So I've said the legislation, so let's put it aside. Let's talk about really the best practice. If we're going to send someone up to work at a height, we really need to protect them, don't we? So I guess the question I have for you is, how many people here climb 18 feet up in the air, working up? Okay. And any particular reason you're not using fall arrests? The ones that, I only saw 4 or 5 hands that said, yes, we do. So the ones that don't, without embarrassing anybody, what's the reason for not using them? By the way, this was a question. I'm waiting for an answer. Don't think about it? Hassle? Okay. Anything else? Time and money, yeah. Absolutely. It's interesting you say time and money, because I do a lot of dealings with manufacturing as well, and this sector is blessed. Blessed meaning we can't take the land and the lake and the elevators, move them to China or Mexico. You cannot do that. We can't take the 600 acres here and move them, right? But if you're making gadgets for cars, or fridges, parts for refrigerators or whatever, you can easily shut the plant down and move it, right? And it happens all the time. But we're lucky in this industry, so you've got an industry that's growing, believe it or not, which is quite unusual. We're used to shrinking industries, such as manufacturing and so on. But that said, you mentioned that the fall arrest is not used because it's a hassle, it's cost, time, whatever it is. Has anyone here ever fallen from height? Not trying to embarrass anybody, but okay. Do you mind sharing that?
Working inside of a grain dryer.
Grain dryer? Let them hear you if you don't mind, sorry.
Working in a grain dryer, sweeping walls down. It was like the next thing I remember is laying on the ground and looking up and couldn't move.
What happened?
I fell like 27 feet or so.
Holy cow. Okay.
And I just had a few compression fractures in my spine. Other than that, I'm good. So it was a real miracle.
Absolutely. 27 feet is a long way. So what's the reason not using fall arrest? Or you do now? Okay. So the fall arrest that you use, did you get it to suit you, or are other people using it as well?
Other people use it.
Okay. So how do you make sure the size is right for everybody?
It's got adjustments on
Adjustments, okay. You've been trained to adjust it?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
We've been trained by a
Okay, excellent, okay. So it is important, if you're gonna have the equipment, you wanna make sure you have the training that goes with it. Not selling you training, you can go anywhere for training, but the bottom line is you need to be trained as to how to properly use it. Question is, how tight should it be on the thigh, or how tight should it be around the chest? Anybody knows? Not you.
2 fingers.
2 fingers, okay. There, okay. So if you're able to put your, 2 fingers down this way, so it's loose enough but not too tight, yeah? That's one. How about the chest? The strap that goes across the chest. Yeah, fist. This way is close enough. I guess maybe too far, but just a fist. So you want to make sure the fist fits inside the strap, so it's not too tight. So why would you have a fist here and 2 fingers there? Why? Why not the same?
Circulation and mobility.
Okay.
Your breathing.
Oh, you're breathing, your heart is here. Okay, we don't want to restrict it too much. So we want to, you're absolutely right. We want to give it a little bit of, room to work, because again, you're up there working. Obviously your heart is working faster than usual because you're doing physical work. So you want to make sure that it's adjusted properly. So we're working up there. So when you're working up there, do you have also a lanyard, or what do you have? Lanyard? How long is the lanyard?
We have the one with the elastic.
Yeah,
And it's probably 6 or 8 feet.
6 feet probably. Okay. 6 foot lanyard. And when that, anybody knows lanyards, or you know what I'm talking about? It's like a bungee cord. Okay. If he falls, why would you use a lanyard? Do you mind sharing that? What's the purpose of the lanyard? Absorbs the shock. It's a shock absorber. The spring in it that will absorb the shock. Otherwise, if you fall with a straight line, the huge impact on the thighs and the back, right? So this will absorb the shock from injuring the person. So the 6 foot lanyard that you're using, at what height do you use it? How high do you work usually? Like what's the lowest height you work at? Yeah.
Probably
20 feet? 20, no less? Huh? Not 12, okay. So he works at 20 feet. He's got a 6 foot lanyard. Is that adequate? Yeah? Yeah, for sure? Okay. If he free falls from where he is, and put up with me for a second, if he free falls for 5 feet before this thing deploys, because you remember it's loose, right? It's attached. And so put up with me, 5 feet he falls, that's 5 feet. Okay, we'll put it there. The 6 foot lanyard, does it stay 6 feet when it deploys? So what happens to it when it deploys? Extends to what, roughly? It becomes 9.5 feet. So say 10. So we have 5 plus 10, right? We're at 15 feet. If you're 6 feet tall and you're attached to the D-ring, okay, you have to factor in that 6 foot height. We're at 21 feet, right? Being in the safety business, I always have to say, you have to factor in 3 feet for safety factor. 24 feet. Give me that. Give me 3 feet, okay? So, are you safe working at 20 feet height with the equipment you have? Iffy. He's going to hit the ground first. We don't want to damage any more vertebrae, but it's something that you have to think about. That's all the reason I'm raising that is I want you to stop and think about it. So the question is, do I need a 4 foot lanyard or a 6 foot lanyard? Think about it. Do I need a retractable line? Anybody know that? The retractable line? It's a coil that releases the line as you walk. What happens if you slip and fall? It locks. Okay? And as a matter of fact, a lot of suppliers say do not use lanyards in situations under 18 feet. You should use the retractable lines. Okay? The whole idea I'm sharing with you here is I want you to stop and think about what if. Do I have the right equipment? Do I have the right length lanyard? What if I work at, do you ever work at 15 feet? It can happen. One of the examples I mentioned construction, they're notorious. You know, I do some job site audits for my clients. So I drop in at job sites and I, you know, take a look and that kind of stuff, help them with what they're doing. And they have a lot of contractors that do work for them, drywallers, whatever, electricians and so forth. We see a guy on a scaffold and, you know, he's doing drywalling and all that kind of stuff. And I said to the site superintendent, his name is Jonathan, I said, Jonathan, does he look like he's having a good, you know, lanyard on him, or doesn't look right to me? And Jonathan yells at him, he says, hey, John, are you attached? He goes, oh yeah, I'm attached. Look, here's my lanyard. Lanyard is like 12 feet. The guy is at 18 feet high. 12-foot lanyard, if it deploys, you know, plus all the rest of the stuff that I added, what happens? He ain't gonna be saved, you know? So that's another thing that you need to think about. You know, what if, and so on. With the fall arrest system on and everything attached, and everything is the right length and the right circumstance, conditions, and so on, and you slip and fall, and this thing deploys, you know, and absorbs the shock, and you're hanging there. How do we have a plan to get you down? Anybody has a plan? Anybody with a plan? What's that?
Call 911.
They're sitting right here. The last thing you want is to have, well, how long should, what's your name? Ken. How long should Ken be hanging in there before we get him down? What's that? No more than 10 minutes? Anybody else? As soon as possible. No more than 20 minutes, supposedly, as they say. You don't want to restrict the blood flow and all that. Plus the pressure on that, you know, on the thighs and the back. So the last thing you want is, what do we do now? You look up there and, Ken, hang in there. It's lunchtime. We'll be back. Like, you know, hang in there, right? He is hanging. But anyways, so ideally you want to have a plan. How do we get him down? Platform, okay. Do you have a forklift or articulating boom or something that you can use, that you can, you know, bring him down? Calling 911, great. They can come and help. But at the same time, you have to be responsible as the employer to make sure that you bring that person down as soon as possible. Okay? Then we get into confined space. Again, people have fall arrest when they go into confined space. I'm assuming everybody here. How many people here go into confined space? There's certain things that apply for it to be confined space. First of all, it's not designed for continuous human occupancy, as they call it. So can you bring a desk here and sit down and work here all day? Yeah, absolutely. You can. It's noisy and it's warm, but that's okay. Otherwise, you can. So can you then, let me reverse it. Can you go into the bins behind me and work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week? It's not designed for continuous human occupancy, okay? Ideally, you go in and you do your work, whatever you need to do, and get out, okay? So that's confined space. Does it have restricted means of entry or egress? Okay, is this restricted? Not really. Restricted meaning a manhole or a small opening, that kind of thing. Okay, can you escape unaided? Here, obviously, you could. In a confined space, you most likely need help to get out, and so on and so forth. So it's defined. That's what I'm getting at. If you're under the federal legislation, it's defined in the Canada Labour Code Part 2. If you're under provincial, it's defined under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So they define them as to what they are. Did it answer a question? Okay. Then we talk about, again, checking the environment, air, meaning oxygen. How about dust? Is that a problem? Obviously, we need to make sure that's, we check it before we go in. How about carbon monoxide or whatever it is? They have instruments. I'm sure you've seen them. Ideally, you want to check before you go in and make sure the reading is safe to go in. Then you fill out the forms. Then you have the authorized person sign it. It doesn't take long. It takes a couple minutes, but you have to do it. With the confined space as well, what happens if somebody collapses in there? What do we do? So they're wearing a harness. They went into the side entry. Well, if they go from the top entry, you can pull them out with a tripod. These guys have it, right? And hopefully most places have it if they go top entry. But what about side entry? How do you get the person out? How do you pull them out? Not only that, if the opening is this high, that you're going through, how do we get this person out? All I'm suggesting is, this gentleman here said a plan, having a plan. And if somebody says a plan is to call 911, and they're all smileys, some fire departments do not enter bins. And I know, for example, some close to London, past London, they don't go in the bins because they're not trained. So you call 911, and it's nothing against the volunteer fire department. You call them in, and they come and say, okay, get them out, and we'll look after them. And that's when you say, well, no, I called you to come in and get them out for me, but we're not trained to do that. The large centers are lucky, I guess. If you're in Sarnia, London, Toronto, whatever, they have full-fledged training and all this kind of stuff. But in some areas, there's no training. They're not, trained, or they not enter the confined space. What do you do? Back to the point that you made, you need a plan. What do we do in case of emergency? You have to have something in place. You have to have a plan, that's all, to rescue people. You don't want anybody to go in and not come out. With the rescue as well, you have to decide, what type of equipment do we need? You might need equipment that will help you bring the person out. What type of training? Who's responsible to quarterback it, I guess? When the fire department arrives, are we going to have someone at the front there? Who's that person to direct them to the right away so there's no wasted seconds? You know what I mean? And so on and so forth. You need something in place to make sure that what you're doing is right. And again, if you need information on rescue procedures, tap into their website. We've got stuff there, and actually we're still working. I'm working with the Canada Labour Code inspectors to put out a generic rescue plan in place that once completed, we will make it available to all members as well, that people can tap into it. Take it, adjust it, to suit their need, because this will be generic, it will be good, as an overall type best practice, but you need to have your own fingerprint on it as to what your environment, will allow you to do. The bottom line is, how do we best meet the law, at the same time continue to do the business functions to ensure success for that business. You can have a very safe place if you throw a padlock on and send everybody home, right? But it doesn't serve the purpose. So the whole idea is to work within the frame that's there and at the same time achieve what you need to achieve, ensuring safety of everyone. With the confined space as well, when you enter the confined space, do you have an attendant outside? Yeah? Always. And one of my stories with the attendant, I did some work with Goderich Elevators up in Goderich. Then they switched to South Pier. then now it's P&H. Anyways, I was there just after the, about 3 months after the tornado hit. Remember that tornado that hit there? And I don't know if you're familiar with the area, but they're right along the waterway, along the lake, and across the bay there, they have a salt mine that's also operational. And when the storm hit, the crane operator of the salt mine died. I don't know if you remember that, read about it. Died didn't see the funnel coming, and he died. My story, I guess, is when I was at Godrich Elevator doing the training, they had a huge picture blown up of the storm coming off the lake. It's a pretty scary looking thing. But as they told me about it, they mentioned there was one guy at that time inside one of the storage elevators there, and he had an attendant outside. And the attendant luckily saw the funnel coming, and he yelled at the one inside, "Get the hell out." He dashed out, and they both ran into the basement and got saved. Because as you know, the funnel came in, actually caused some damage at their place, but destroyed the center of the town pretty well. I don't know if you've been there, but they're still working on it even today. So the message I have, I guess, is you can't tell what's happening outside. So having an attendant is really important to make sure you're okay, but also to make sure the environment is okay around. Now, if the attendant had to call you and say, "Get the hell out," and you come out and you go, "What's going on?" and you say, "It's lunchtime," that's when you punch him. No, but the attendant is there for a reason. It's to make sure you're okay. And in this case, it worked out really great for them. So always respect that, support and resource. Well, you need to also be trained, and it doesn't matter where you go for training, OABA or somewhere else. Bottom line is you need to be trained. You need to know the environment you're working in. You need to know what the hazards are. It's a responsibility of the employer. Simple as that. They need to tell you. And I'm not saying anything against employers. That's what is required. They need to share with you what the hazards are so you can do what you need to do. As you're working up there, and if you're gonna slip and fall, you need to be anchored to something, right? That will support you. Are these anchor points rated? Absolutely. They're rated to 5,000 pounds for shock, and you can buy them as permanent anchor points, or you can buy them as temporary or removable anchor points. So you can have an anchor point here as an example in the roof. You mount it obviously to the supplier's recommendation. You don't go to Canadian Tire, buy the bolts for it. Sorry, Canadian Tire, but you have to buy the proper bolts that go with it because it's engineered to take the weight. You can have it permanent, meaning it stays there and all the time that you need it, or it could be temporary, that you can mount it, and after a year or whatever you're getting rid of this building as an example, you can take it off and mount it elsewhere, that kind of thing. So anchor points are really important, and you have to tie yourself to an anchor point. Can you tie to a railing? No. It's not rated for 5,000 pounds. It has to be engineered, stamped, okay? So you have to tie yourself into some proper anchor point. I couldn't help but I did also training, it was the last week, for one of the Ontario Agri business members, and they had a scaffold up. As I was doing training on forklifts, and they had a scaffold on the roof. They were doing some work up there, and the guy was wearing the fall arrest attached to the scaffolding. Is that safe? Absolutely not. If he's gonna fall, he's gonna take the scaffolding with him. So where's the anchoring? It's not a proper anchor. So it is important to make sure that we have the proper anchoring. If you have a tower, like I just mentioned, the cell phone towers, have you seen people climb that? How do they climb that? It's very narrow, very small. They can't climb from through the inside. they have to climb from the outside. So how do you make sure you're protected? If they have ladder, in some cases they don't, beyond a certain point. So how do you protect that person?
They have a safety rail on that they hook into. Most of them.
A lot of them don't, believe it or not. My son works in that industry. That's why he's an engineer in that industry. But you know what they do? Quite often when they climb, they have the D-ring attached to a lanyard, but it's a double lanyard. 2 lanyards to one, yeah. So you hook this lanyard and you climb 3-4 feet, then you hook the next lanyard and you disconnect this one, you 3-4 feet, 3-4 feet, as long as you remember. What's that? Yeah, actually there was a fatality in Alberta about 3 months ago, where somebody fell off a tower. But again, it's a new norm now. They're all over the place. You've seen them everywhere. A cage ladder is a requirement for climbing against a structure. You don't need to. I'll tell you why. With a cage ladder, or a fixed ladder as they call it, against the wall or against the bin, at 7 feet high, the cage have to start. You know that cage? And when you're inside that cage, you can't use a fall arrest, because if you slip, you're gonna back into it, kind of thing, and it will hold you. But every 30 feet within that ladder, if it's a high ladder, you have to have a rest platform, as they call it. Every 30 feet, you have to have a rest platform. So the worker climbing, after 30 feet, you stop, catch your breath. That's what a rest platform is. One of the members called about a year ago, said, I have a worker that refused to climb up. It's a feed mill north of Barrie, around Barrie. Anyways, he said the worker refused to climb up. Everybody has the right to refuse unsafe work. And the worker dealt with it right. He told him, this ladder is unsafe. I don't want to use it. I can't use it. So I went there the next day, and guess what the ladder was made of? 2x4s. And guess what the rungs were made of? 2x4s. Why change? So how far are the rungs from the wall? 1.5 inches. So you expect somebody to climb 16 feet up in the air with just barely their fingers in, forget about the toes, So when I went there and I said, this is, unfortunately I kicked myself because I didn't take a picture of it. I should have. But anyways. So he said, okay, we'll get he said, I've done this for 16 years since I bought the mill. Nobody said anything. So, well, it's not right. So he said, I'll get the machine shop close by to do it for us. I said, before you do it, let me send you the data sheet so you can follow it. So you don't make it and I come back and I say, oh, it doesn't meet the standards. You don't need that. So I sent it to him and they did a really nice job. I went there a month later. The cage started at 7 feet. All these are in the standards of the fixed ladders. Minimum 6 inches from the wall, the rungs, so you have enough room for your feet. The diameter of the rungs, 3/4 inch minimum, okay? And it goes on and on. So if you need that information on it, we have it, okay? I'll get it to you if you need it. But that's, again, requirements under fixed ladders. So I'm moving to the conveyors and augers, I guess. We talked about auger safety and all that. The challenge with augers is twofold. The federal legislation is different than the provincial. Actually, they're not that different. The enforcement is different. Provincial say you cannot be in that environment with the machine energized. Simple as that. The federal say that, but they don't enforce it. They kind of have a bit of a leeway in that area. That said, I guess my message is, with the new structures such as we see behind me, with that kind of new structure, it's much easier, with the sweeps than the old bins. I'm sure everybody will agree. But at the end of the day, if you're going to go in to do work, you need to protect yourself. And my suggestion is you lock out and tag out before you go in. Okay, let me then talk about lockout, tag out. Might as well, since we're talking about that as well. Some companies say, you know what? Here's your lock and tag. This is yours to use. Okay, lock number 5 is yours, as an example. Lock number 4, is someone else's, and so on. Some companies have this in a central location. And if you need to lock out, tag out, you go and take it and sign off your name next to it so we know who has lock 5, right? And you go use it. The whole idea really is to, again, have the name, the date, and so on, and you throw it on the equipment, lock it out, tag it out. How long does that take? And again, if you need to go in more often, if I'm the employer, I'll say I might as well give you a lock permanently with you. It's easier. It's in your toolbox. You need to go in and do whatever, grab it, lock it out, tag it out, and do the work. Yeah, again, a company policy could be easily, any space you enter that will present a hazard must be locked out, tagged out, as an example. You've got this, you throw it on, done. So, and again, I'm not simplifying, I'm just saying it's just a habit. But going back to the policy, if a company have a policy, and if they don't enforce it, what happens? It's not worth what it's written on, right? I had a lock, one of these hasps. Now, if you have more than one person working, shall I trust you with your lock and I don't have a lock and I'm working as well? No. You have to have every person that works with their hands in the machine have to have a lock, believe it or not. So you throw your lock on, and I throw my lock on. So this one will take 6 locks. And again, it's a hasp. You put it, you disconnect, you put this on, and you throw the lock on, and so on. Now, if you're done working, if there's 3 locks on this, and my lock is on yours and yours, if you're done working, you can take your lock and go. Can I start the machine? No, because there's still 2 locks. It will not allow this thing to open, right? And if you're done, you can take your lock off. Can I start the machine? No, still have a lock on it. So you have to make sure that the locks are removed, and everybody with a lock if they have their hands in the machine. Now, simple things, I guess, if you're going to lock out, tag out. So do you go and disconnect and throw this on? That's what we do, disconnect. That's it. Okay, so physically I'm standing in front of the panel. I disconnect this way. That's it. From the side. Ah, why is that? Kickback or arc flash. It can happen. Arc flash can happen. Okay, so basically you stand to the side and you disconnect. So if something happened and if the panel blow for whatever reason, it hits the guy behind you. No, it doesn't hit you in the face, right? You don't want it to hit you in the face. So again, and this morning I had about 4 young people in the crowd, and I think it was great, like 12, 15-year-olds. It's good to, that they get exposed to that. So when you disconnect, you stand to the side, disconnect. Then you go back to your point. You go and double check. How do you make sure that that disconnect is working, right? So, I mean, it's important if you're going to teach somebody to disconnect or to follow through. And by the way, it should be in writing. Something like that, like a lockout, tag out, should be in writing because you don't want to miss anything. You want to go through the steps. You disconnect, right? Away from it, you disconnect. If there's more than one person, you throw this on. Then you put the locks on, right? If it's only one person, then you can use just that. And after you disconnect, you go back, as you said, you check the start button, right? Make sure I locked the right thing. It doesn't work, that's fine. Now, the other thing too is there any other energies I need to worry about? Anybody have energies other than electrical on Like what? Hydraulic, okay. You need to neutralize that as well. If you have air, pneumatic, you need to do that. Gravity, spring-loaded, whatever it is, you want to make sure that you isolate everything. You make it safe for you to work. That's the idea. Then once you do that, you go back and you start working. You do what you need to do. And how many people here work in maintenance or do maintenance work? Okay. So in some cases, maintenance work, if you're going to replace a belt on a pulley or something, you might need the guard open so you can adjust it. Make sense? So in a case like this, there's an allowance for you to do that, as long as you cordon off the area, make sure nobody's close. You do it, you take the lockout, tag out off. You do what you need to do, as long as I said, you do take precautions. And once you're done, you go back, lockout, tag out, finish putting the guards on and everything. Okay? So there's an allowance for maintenance work. With the lockout, tag out as well, not all places have people, everybody locking out and tagging out. Some places have what they call authorized people and or affected people. Affected meaning I'm working on the machine and you're the maintenance person, you come and say, Fred, go talk to your supervisor to give you something else because I need to work on this. So I'm affected, because I was working here, now I'm not, right? Do I need to know much about it? No. As long as I know that the tag and the lock, if they're on, stay away. That's all I need to know, because I'm not allowed to do that. The authorized people, such as Rob in the back or others, they're the ones that do the lockout and the tag out. They're the ones that need to be trained fully in that area. Okay? So you have authorized and you have affected. Some places have everybody authorized, everybody with their own lock. Whatever works, whatever turns their crank, whatever makes sense for them business-wise. They do what they need to do. So, with the lockout, tag out again, you want to make sure you isolate everything. You want to make sure nothing will start while you're in that space, or at least with your hands in the equipment.